This episode is so much fun. I love that we went to the circus, especially with Kaylee Bray as one of the folks from Pixel Circus. So it felt perfect.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was definitely a chaotic show. We had a lot of fun doing it.
Paul and Charlie, I have to first ask, what was it like to have to perform your circus audition as opposed to just rolling and describing it?
Is there something worse than terrifying? I can't remember. Uh, yeah, well, just like sitting next to Ross Bryant, who was this hurricane of jokes the whole time, was my dominant memory of the whole thing. Everything else was just kind of a blur.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Just stay out of the way.
yeah. Ross, when he starts going, you have to roll with
Keep your
it.
hands and feet clear.
But at the same time, I mean not that we necessarily go to those extremes in our own games, but when we're playing D&D just by ourselves, we do a lot of stuff like that. I mean, maybe I don't juggle quite as much as I did in the show,
It was very
but thank you. But that's the kind of stuff that we find is some of the real joy and fun of playing D&D is being able to really act out those scenes. And yes, sometimes there's some roles that need to happen, but whenever there's an opportunity to play it, it's a lot of fun. So this was definitely sort of an extreme version of that, but we had a great time.
I love that. And then was the character creation process different for you both, knowing that you only had an hour with the characters?
I think part of the fun of the game is taking it kind of seriously as a game and really having a character that you will shed a tear for when it's eaten, as you, even though it's going to be eaten. It's still fun to character creation is always fun. So it's more fun to make a fully fleshed out character than it is just to say, well, I know what's gonna happen, so I'll just not focus on it.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a moment after you create the character, because in the character creation process, you really sort of invest yourself in it. So there's a moment when you finish creating the character where you're like, oh, wait, maybe I don't want this character to die. But at the same time, to Charlie's point, that's the fun of the game, is being invested and really and caring.
Yeah.
So it's all fun.
And then one of the things I've really, really enjoyed about Faster Purple Worm is I'm always surprised by like the amount of heart and how these characters that often are not like full-fledged adventurers will step up into their like moments of heroism. So Bill, I have to ask, what were your thoughts when Allison did the complete opposite and threw the people they were supposed to save under the bus?
I love being surprised up there. That's a big part of the joy of having great performers is, they're really in the moment, speaking from their own point of view, their own voice, their own personality, and that will constantly result in things that you don't expect. And that's the fun of it. It is sort of a high wire act being up there, and if everybody just did what you prescribed to them, it wouldn't be nearly as exciting.
It's stock car D&D. You stay for the crashes.
That's right.
And you don't really know who the hero is until the end. I mean, in our episode, who knew that the hero was going to be the Chihuahua at the end?
That's
Oh, I
very
thought it was pretty obvious.
I just love that moment because the complete about face of look at them, they're running away. I'm like, all right, let's roll. This is not what I expected. And then, John, can you kind of walk me through the behind the scenes aspect of producing this episode of Faster Purple Worm? Because I've talked to so many people that were in front of the camera, but I haven't really gotten that behind the scenes aspect of it.
Sure. Yeah, I think it all starts with the adventure ideation. So we sat down with Kaylee and that it's a balancing act of allowing the DM to come in with their unique point of view, their unique voice, and allowing them to run the adventure that they want to run, but also providing guidance to make sure that it's going to fit the tone of the show, that they're not doing something that's going to make it a 3 hour extravaganza. It starts there. And then once we feel like in this case, Kaylee, has a story that is going to work, from there, the producing was pretty easy, I would say, because you just want to make sure that your players are there.
Mhm.
They know what they're in for, even though they don't. You prepare them without letting them know what's coming,
Yeah.
and then let it go.
Very cool. And then one of the things I really love about this show is the live music, because it gets like a the genre and we get to have it really amping up the vibe. What inspired that decision for the show?
Uh, you know, I there's a my wife has friends who are in this sort of community of improvisational theater people in Los Angeles, and they do some really amazing shows that we've attended, and a lot of them had that live music aspect in them. So when we started talking about this, that was something that came up pretty quickly as just as something that would help us transform Dungeons and Dragons from a tabletop gaming experience to a performative experience. And that's, something we thought was very important because, as even the greatest tabletop game, you don't really want to sit and watch them play if they're not on some level acknowledging the fact that there is an audience and we have an obligation to that audience. So introducing a musician, I think, was just part of what we thought would help move us into a more performative state without undermining the sort of player DM relationship.
I love
I do think we first looked for a bagpiper, and I think we just couldn't when we couldn't find a bagpiper. we we ended up working with Scott.
Paul's rewriting our corporate history even as we speak.
Season 2 will have a bagpiper. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
Perfect.
Perhaps several.
I love
when
that.
we go big.
That's so much fun. And then Paul and Charlie, what did Kaylee Bray bring as a DM for you as a player that has maybe stood out to you versus other DMs that you've played with?
She was a lot of fun. She was a lot of fun to play with. I think she brought a lot of energy and a really sort of sly, mischievous humor. That was a lot of fun. I mean, she always sort of sitting behind that screen. It felt like she always had something up her sleeve, which clearly she did, as it turns out. But no, she was a lot of fun. She pushed us, and let us run. And the fact that she was able to keep up with Ross as he had a cavalcade of comedy rolling out of him. It was impressive. But no, the main thing was she was a lot of fun. You could tell that she was having fun at the table with us, which is a big part of making this work.
Yeah, it's nice to see her kind of, lurking behind the DM screen, actively plotting against you the whole time. It's like, how can we make these guys look more foolish than they already do? And
she does have
good at putting you right there.
Yeah, she does have an energy where it feels like she's always ready to pounce. Like it's just a matter of time. You're kind of messing with a big cat in a tree.
Oh my gosh, I completely agree. And then you guys have mentioned Ross a few times. I've seen him on some of the Dropout shows like Game Changer and Make Some Noise, and it's always so much fun and so impressive. So I was very impressed that you guys were able to like bounce off him as well as you like and really amp everything up that he was doing. Can you talk about kind of building that chemistry at the table with him as well as with Allison?
I
Yeah.
don't.
Oh, go ahead.
For me, it was very much just it was staying next to a hurricane for him. But Allison, I think was fun too because she brought a kind of different energy to it.
Mm-hmm.
He was manic and she was placid a little.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, it was interesting. It was fun. I don't feel like we kept up with Ross particularly well. I mean, that's nice of you to say so, but I think we were the shrubbery on the road there.
I think the one thing that they both brought though is they both came with a real sort of focus and commitment to their character. I mean, Allison came in and was just 100% about the rocks, and she committed to that and stuck with it. And in a way, that's really fun to play with, right? It's fun to play with someone who is gonna stay committed to what they're doing. And Ross was equally committed to his character, albeit at uh, a much higher sort of velocity, maybe. But yeah, I mean, with all of these games, we have a few minutes before the game starts to sort of meet each other and do a little bit of talking backstage, but there's not really a whole lot beyond just sort of introducing each other and kind of getting a sense for who each other is. And then really it's just at the table, it's, rolling with the punches and seeing what happens. And that's part of the fun of it. And then, I try to kill Charlie as often as I can, but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then we've actually kind of had different experiences with getting people prepped for games where they've either played together a lot and know each other, or we've had, like an hour or so for people to get together and kind of set up where their characters are going to start with. And it's neither are right or wrong, but they both definitely have different energies coming into the game. If the characters have had an hour or so or really know each other really well, they tend to come in kind of hot.
Mm-hmm.
And if they haven't, then there's this kind of fun feeling out process where everybody's, like Paul said, has got to kind of see where everybody fits into the party and how the party fits together. And that can be kind of fun to watch that play out in real time too, when people get surprised by what the other characters are doing. That's kind of fun.
At the show we just did in San Francisco at the San Francisco Sketch Fest, we actually all had a couple of hours of drinking together before the show started, and boy, did that change things.
Yeah, speaking of coming in hot,
Yeah, right.
And then we've passed kind of the midway season point with Fast Purple Worm being released. I'm curious. I'm really hoping there's a second season. What have you learned from kind of the first half of the season coming out that you would like to bring into a potential second season?
Less Paul.
more Paul. That's where we differ. Yeah,
I would love to see us double down on audience interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
one
think
of the things. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say one of the things that we shot this sort of at the tail end of COVID protocols, and so there were a lot of really specific restrictions as to what we couldn't do during the shoot. So you'll in the show, for example, while we have audience interaction, you'll notice the characters or Bill never actually go into the audience, and the audience never comes up on stage, which is something that we've since been able to do at live shows. And so, to John's point, going back into the studio to film this again with a little bit more flexibility, I think gives us the opportunity to do even more horrific things to both the players and the audience.
Oh,
now, what I found as a DM is that the players aren't the only ones I might be able to kill. there are audience members and crew members that I might be able to suck into the death count.
Into your maelstrom of death.
Oh, I like that.
So you learned you want to up the kill count. That's
yeah.
Absolutely.
Right,
I
right.
also think one of the things that was great watching the first half of this season has been the diversity and the variety of players and storytellers, and I think that's something that we also would love to uh, continue to expand on, both in terms of more DMs with different stories and different kinds of stories. But also maybe reach out to a broader group of players. I mean, we had a lot of success with bringing in one or two players who had just never played D&D. And I think that having the show out there where people can actually see it, see what it's like, I think may get a few people to sort of get over their sort of fear or suspicion of it, and maybe join us for a game.
And we get them over their fear and suspicion of it by killing them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You think watching the show made them less suspicious of us?
Well, maybe it sort of puts our cards on the table, but
That's their reward.
Sweet release of death.
there you go.
Oh, that's so fun. Have you guys ever thought about filming and releasing the live shows that you do at conventions?
We did stream one.
We we did a live show at PAX Unplugged that was recorded, and so that's available on our YouTube channel. The challenge is when we do a live show, we really want to make sure that first and foremost it's for the audience.
Yeah.
And so that to a certain degree sometimes limits sort of technically how we're able to stream them, but we would love to. I mean, we would love to continue as we continue to do these shows, make them more available and record more of them and stream them.
Yeah, shooting a live show is actually a pretty big undertaking if you want to do it properly. I loved that PAX show, and I love that people are able to see it. But listen, we had such a fantastic crew when we were shooting the TV show, and it's very difficult to duplicate that level of technical ability when you're out on the road. So I think we'd need to consider it carefully about our ability to really do it properly.
Yeah. And to Bill's point also, I mean, just once again to sort of shout out the crew of Faster Purple Worm. They were amazing. Partly just that they were sort of learning as we were how to shoot this chaotic, ridiculous live show. And every episode, like they'd come up to us before the episodes, going back to the producing thing, they'd come up before and say, so tell us what's going to happen so that we can set up, cameras and shots and all of that. And we would kind of say, we don't know. We think it's going to be this, but we don't really know. And we really forced the camera operators and the directors to, be on their toes and figure things out. And they were great.
And then what has been the most rewarding part of this experience for each of you?
Bill?
Well, I guess for me personally, it's been the audience interaction, and that's partly because of the role that I'm in, but it's also because they've been so supportive and generous and sort of eager to jump into this very strange thing that we're doing. The audiences, at least at the live shows, they have some idea of what they're getting into now.
Yeah.
But boy, these studio audiences at the for the TV show, most of them really had no prep for what they were getting into, and we really were afraid that we would have these groups of people that were, taking a step back and saying, "Whoa, wait a minute, what this isn't Dungeons and Dragons as I'm accustomed to it." But boy, they just jumped in so enthusiastically, and we had so much fun with them. And to Paul's point, I just can't wait for a season 2 where we can play with that a little bit more and engage with them and have audiences that that do know what they're in for and are excited about being there because they know the show. And I think it's going to be just a different level of energy and interaction that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I will add playing with some world-class funny people has been a highlight. Being at the table with whether it be
Me.
Iffy, Nawadaway, or Patton Oswalt or Deborah Ann Wall, just being able to sit back and just roll with laughter at something that they've just done. I mean, I'm used to playing with Paul a lot, and you just don't get that.
Yeah, a
But
very
so
low
with
bar.
these really talented players, it was a real like an eye opener.
Thank you.
There was a very meaningful moment for me, and I don't even know if it made the final taping, but there was a moment in one of the episodes where I'm playing around with a mini, and at some point we were shooting it, and at some point I said, God, what am I doing? And Deborah Ann Woll leaned over and said, "This is your job."
Yes.
And and just that sort of acknowledgement by from somebody, who's obviously huge in this space, and I have a lot of respect for it, to have them just vocalize that, yeah, you're kind of doing this now for a living. That meant a lot to me. That was awesome.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, what I took away the most meaningful part of all of this to me really was kind of like, to John's point, working with all these players and the fact that each and every one of them came in with such a sort of open willingness to play was just a wonderful feeling. I mean, whether I was on stage with them in this episode or whether I was backstage producing, I mean, just the fact that we had just dozens of people coming in every day, just ready and willing to play. Yes, to sort of stay within our, weird confines and rules to make the show work, but just with just such joy. And sort of to Bill's point, the fact that there's this community of people who can both take this seriously enough to make it productive, to make it, their jobs for the most part, but also at the same time still have that, sort of childish enthusiasm, that love of the game. I think that was a wonderful thing. Otherwise, that would have been probably the worst 2 weeks of our lives if it had really had to feel like work, but it didn't.
It was busy.
Yes.
I mean, all of that stuff that they said, but also I kind of love that we've created something which is like, D&D boiled down to the essence of what I enjoy about it, which is basically just gathering around a table, telling a story and laughing your ass off the whole time you're doing it. And that's it. That's all I needed. And I think it's fun that we've kind of created something that does that.
Well, I love the show. I cannot wait for the rest of the season, and I really want to be in the audience for season 2. So
We'll save you a seat.
Yeah,
There
careful
you go.
what you wish for.
I can't wait. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk to me today.